CSFs are ranked traditionally. If something is important, it's published in literature. The most of the time it's cited in the literature, defines how organisations organise their resources. We've got ranked, there are 42 critical success factors for this type of issue, and they are ranked. We know that they are. That's how organisations know what they need to do. They go through the top management score, they go down the list, and they make sure they tick off each one, prioritising in that way. It's about ranking. Traditionally, our research has shown that this is utterly inappropriate, and we'll explain why. You think conceptually ranking critical success factors, the things that are important, would be a natural and important way to move forward. But in fact, we're going to outline with the CSF Basic model that the reasons that this is inappropriate and in fact can be counterproductive if you work through the league table of critical success factors for many reasons. First is they change over time. They're not set in stone. Here's a comparison from 2001 to 2007 of critical success factors for organisations. I mean, this is in the dawn of digital transformation, where organisations were looking to develop an architecture enterprise system to bring the legacy databases together. And top management has always been the number one critical success factor. It's ranked as number one over that period. Change management in 2007, from 2001, up 19 places in that rank to manage the process. Well, how do we organise our implementation efforts? Well, the first thing is we can segment the implementation process. There are actually 4 well-established points within the implementation lifecycle that we should use when we go through a digital transformation program. The chartering phase, where we lay out the plans, the delivery, go live phase, project phase, immediately after it's delivered, shakedown, iron out the issues, and then most importantly, arguably, is the optimising that. So it's in place, and now we need to make sure the world know about it and use it. It helps tackle problems because problems can arise at any point, any of those 4 points, and we need to be aware of that. This is why we have critical success factors, and we need to move away from the idea of ranking critical success factors to identifying where within the implementation life cycle they need to be addressed. Because tackling factors in a timely and logical manner is particularly important. On this we need to plan ahead. A research group up at Newcastle University were the first group to look at the implementation life cycle for benefits realisation from this type of endeavour. In the chartering phase, they said that benefits planning is essential. In the project phase, benefits delivery is not only one point, it's about a series of reshaping activities. In the shakedown phase, it's about monitoring the outlined benefits. And in the onward development phase, it was about building for the next generation of that digital journey. The second, now we've looked at the implementation lifecycle, the second thing we need to look at is what resources do we deliver? It's about saving money. Many of us, I'm sure, are aware that of the 3 principal areas of people, process, technology. It must be applied. It really should be applied to digital transformation programs. In the organisational context for local authorities, what that means is that it's the end users, the people who are delivering the digital services, and the implication for them inputting the data and extracting the data, making so that not only the data is captured, but that they can retrieve and utilise that. What we're talking about is developing knowledge workers. We need to think about business processes and then the IT infrastructure, and the training of staff falls into the IT aspect of that. For Bradford Council, went through this journey. We spoke about refuse collection, how Bradford Council's digital journey, moved from using Excel spreadsheets and a BT phone book to map out the new the newly developed housing estates so that they can suddenly deliver recycling appropriately towards an integrated database that could offer improved services and reduce complaints, and also be effective in scheduling change, plan change on the delivery routes so that the residents could be prepared to meet on the correct day. It could never happen from an Excel spreadsheet as it was back in 2007. It had to move towards a system where they could, if they wanted to implement a new route on the delivery refuse route, because it had to go through the database, because it's the only way that you can tag the resident with the change in the service. That's just one example of how a practical delivery is integrated with the digital element of this. For Bradford Council, what we did is about making observations. I couldn't go through this now, but this is how when we're developing new critical success factors, we look at the critical success factors of 2007 before the dawn of digital transformation. When you go to an organisation that's going through a digital journey, you need to be aware and understand what things you're looking for in order that a critical success factor can be born. The reason why this is important is because we're going to highlight the 10 newly identified critical success factors. There are only 2 research groups that tackle digital transformation. Our research group and a group called Co at Sheffield. We have together outlined the 10 new critical success factors, and we're going to go through in detail, but it's really important to know the background, how our research group got there. I'm sure Co had a similar approach, but in terms of the theoretical outcome, it's really important to go through this journey. When we look at the people-related issues, we have to think about what concepts were important to us. And customer-facing activities and customer relationship management were the 2 key components, and that helped us tease out 5 key issues. When we sat in the project team of the implementation and looking at what resources had been invested in, it was managing change within the customer-facing organisation. There are 2 philosophies of change. There's the plan and the emergent-led approach. But to tackle change, you can do it by tackling the power-based groups through political and financial incentives, tackling the interest-based groups of the needs and the mutual benefits, or the individual level for legislation. Perhaps it could be that their job role is changing and the contract issues are dealt with. Ward and Hemsley outlined that when you're changing the way people need to interact with the digital services and deliver them, with some challenges that need to be dealt with. Establishing a trading strategy was really important for people-based investments, and that is about addressing a few processes, an implementation phase, a training and learning phase, and most importantly, developing knowledge workers through a post-delivery training phase. Quantifying and delivering the evaluation of the training is important. There's a pathway. We won't go into the detail of that. It's in the information that we published. We won't look at that. But identifying and providing end user support is also an important issue. Transition champions are extremely important in undertaking that, as are super users. So for people-related issues, for making sure digital transformation happens, these are really important. Preparing corporate communications also was essential. It's a two-way communication process. And they won't support it unless their information needs are addressed. We can't get the data out of the system for digital services. They won't support it. We'll fly through the process-based approach as well. The 2 key concepts we identified here were the business process re-engineering and the benefits realisation opportunities. Again, it was the formulation of the project team which we identified as a critical success factor. It was about identifying the benefits. There's 3 phases for doing that: an awareness phase, a feeling phase, and a strategic phase. I won't dwell on that too much. For process-based investments, identifying stakeholder investments. For the processes, you need to know the stakeholders that are involved. We mentioned about conflict. If you identify the critical success factors, you can all work together. If you don't have a common goal, then potentially the risk for failure is a lot higher. And this leads to undertaking the design and finance blueprint. We need to map out the customer journey and deliver a strategic vision and a schematic of how it's all going to work in detail. And that needs looking at a roadmap, as is to the scenario, which is really important. The final element we just need to touch on is the technology issues. That's the techno change management issue and managing knowledge. Vendor selection is a process that it's important to go through on that. Portal integration. So there's a 3-phase model here. It's about the information environment, it's about the standard practices, and then how you deliver the value for that. Knowledge and content management is really important for the technology. And again, there are 4 important issues to deal with here: the technoware, humanware, infoWare, organware, system maintenance. ERP systems must be fully supported and if they're to be successful. And that's about customer service and maintenance of that. The final thing is the governance of it. You have to be transparent and accountable. Yeah, that was a good try, but we have to get through that little bit. What that led to is the phasing of CSS. How do we plan our resource investments? Well, we need a taxonomy of critical success factors. We looked at the library of issues, but we can have a taxonomy of anything. It's spatulas, but it's an amusing image there. But for digital transformation, it's really important that you have a taxonomy of all the critical success factors, and we're going to come on to the 10 newly identified critical success factors that you must be aware of in order for the digital program to be successful. What we're saying is, how important is it to rank critical success factors? If you know what they are, you phase them in throughout the implementation lifecycle. You allocate them to a resource-based perspective, people, process, and technology. Otherwise, it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for the delivery of it. It's about continual improvement because it saves some time. CORE is the other research group, other than our research group, are the only people to look at critical success factor for digital transformation issues. What we did, our research group, the only way we could conceptualize a critical pathway was to allocate the critical success factors that were migrated over from the traditional ones, and they mapped them with the 10 newly identified critical success factors was through a CSF-based model. We put a critical success factor in any of the 4 implementation lifecycle steps and against the 3 resource-based perspectives.
Otherwise called as the 4x3 grid.
Otherwise called the 4x3 grid, yes. And here it is. And that's how we do it, and we can allocate and be effective in the delivery of the critical success factors. We spoke about the marketism and the environment, that it's one person's a sunny day, another person's a rainy day. For Bradford Council, we looked at the resources that were being invested in at the Go Live period. It was a 6-month project where we just observed the people, process, technology, and then 2 years later we went back to the project team members and interviewed them and said, what do you think worked well, and in hindsight, what would you change? We took all of that and we went across the country to 7 different suppliers, and we said, this is what Bradford Council thought about their digital transformation journey. do you think it's correct or not? Only when all of these eight stakeholders agreed was it confirmed as a critical success factor. That's the validity of the issues we're going to highlight that we bring to the table. It was highlighted as a heat map. So only where unanimously was it agreed was it determined in literature as being a critical success factor. But what were the results? This is what is really important to everybody. From a resource-based perspective, what our research showed is that 48% of all resources need to be invested in people-related issues, and process and technology divided equally. This goes against common wisdom because training is historically only accounted for 50% of the overall budget for any implementation, particularly digital transformation. Our research shows that far more budget needs to be allocated to the people-related critical success factors for them to be a success. From a resource-based perspective, it's interesting to know whilst people-related critical success factors account for 48%, you need to allocate them in the onward and upward phase because that's where the benefits are realised. But people process and the technology elements are equally important. You have, for the processors, you have to outline them in planning and then you have to readdress them after they're embedded so that they can be ironed, any issues can be ironed out. The technology is different. You must outline it in the chartering phase and then tackle it as it's being delivered for it to be appropriate. And that is how we come up with the critical pathway steps for the delivery. You can see how now we've got a pathway, we know the critical success factors, and now we can have a journey for them. And this is how relevant critical success factors can be outlined for digital delivery. Some were brought forward. Of the 42 that were appropriate for ERP systems, 17 were brought forward. And I won't go through these, but we're not going to touch them. Of all 42 critical success factors, 17 were found to be appropriate and critical for digital transformation programs. But what's most important is the newly identified critical success factors that have been added to those 17. So what we know is that we've got 27 critical success factors we need to address for digital transformation programs. And here they are. It's about delivering the new capabilities. Like I say, it's a combination of our research and the research group over in Sheffield. We're going to go through each one of these just to touch on them and spread those. Got some interesting insights for each of these. The first one is collaborative partner support. But our research and co identified that this must be tackled in the chartering phase as a technology resource base. At a higher level, the training partner support is required to gain maximum benefits from collaboration as a process. The more information provided by the partner, the faster, more effective materials and items are provided. From our perspective, organisation must prepare for management of the information transfer, and supplier must be integrated into the implementation team. From the supplier's perspective, they do a system design document, how they wish it working. They have a managed service which can help with the network is online computing, That's insights on the suppliers that we spoke to. So Andrew, if you want to from Bradford Council's perspective, this is what we heard. Systems were designed by process teams for each of the elements of the ERP system. However, the consultation was done through the workshops involving the key stakeholders within the business. What was interesting, what was surprising about that, it was all about defining the best processes based on the customer goals and our understanding of these goals. One of them saying they want one team, one plan. They were embedded within the organization.
And I think for me that one team, one plan really stuck out because I think I was involved with the rollout of the individual budgets and direct payments within the local authority in London. And I think what the experience there was, because ultimately the service was contracted out by the local authority, but it was really very important to work with the organization that was selected. And I think we had a prolonged period of time where kind of really we worked together to get to the point where both the council and the provider were really confident that there was a common kind of understanding, and there were common goals that they were working towards. And in terms of how effectively to engage the service users.
But I'd say the thing is that it all takes time. There's no.
And then there's the question of validation, because I just a small company, a very small company, not a private company, which is transferred out of councils. We come under pressure from people we provide outsourced services to validate our databases. So they want to make sure that our databases aren't going to leak and give away their information. So that validation process is also has to be built into it. So any change in management it has to improve, and therefore you start to rack up costs. Don't you? There's what people think. They think, well, actually that's all very well, but it's going to cost me, take me 10 years, cost me.
I think that's
reassuring people of that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think that is a genuine concern that most authorities will have. But I think as this work will, as we'll see from this work, what we're really saying is that what is it that councils themselves or any organizations that are seeking to go through this transformation process can do using this methodology, using the model that has been developed in the critical phasing, the critical success factor phasing model that has been developed, and not just relying on your suppliers or not relying on external partners, but what in terms of homework, what can we do as an organization within the council or within any organization for that matter, to do whatever we need to do before we bring other stakeholders on and we take them with us on this transformation journey. So I think at that point it seems to me it's a good thing to move to the next section. Thanks.
Yeah, on my point, this section about forces, we need to appreciate why we're doing the digital transformation journey. We're not talking about any mystic force here. These are the real, practical driving forces. Some things are going to happen within the local authority, whether you like it or not. If you're not prepared for it, then you will be dragged into it unprepared. Some things happen that you have to react to. One of the main driving forces is building a relationship with the customer, the residents, and all the stakeholders. If our customers expect it in a digital world, they expect their refuse to be collected on time, and they expect all of the services to be delivered to a high standard. If organisations like authorities don't do it, then it can be really detrimental. But there's actually financial value here to local authorities and all organisations, because when organisations go through the journey, the value of their assets increase, and there is a real benefit to, particularly if the digital services offer greater functions and if there's a greater physical scope of more ways a customer can interact with the organisation. That touches on revenue generation, which is so it could be part of the strategic goal, but it has ERP systems and digital delivery has reduced the competitive nature of many sectors. So what we're talking about is we're streamlining processes and things will become far more effective. It could be legislation within the local authority. We've seen that services have to be delivered by 2008. That was 10 years ago. We had to deliver 24/7 services, and we had to provide joined-up services. Customers had to be able to communicate between departments. That was set in European legislation, and reputation as well. If things aren't delivered to the standards that the customers expect, then there's a real serious PR issue there that has to be dealt with. There are key restraining forces as well, things that no matter how much you want something to happen, it's not going to happen. But you have to prepare for it and to move forward in the most effective way that you can. The main reason people don't want to do this journey is because of the fear of failure. If you have a legacy database and the data isn't transferred appropriately, then the complaints and the risk to the company will be enormous. That means that we have to align the software with the legacy system before we do the migration. But more than that, we have to understand the customer needs. It actually touches on organisational culture because we have to encourage the flow of data. Many functions are very silo in their operation, and they like it that way. They feel that dealing with other departments is a drain on their resources and a waste of time. But that means that cross-disciplinary teams are really important in this journey, as is the technical diffusion. And that is in areas where there's uncertainty. But what you have to do is set up innovation groups as a part of tackling that change to get the idea through the organisation. And that touches on the issue, the really important issue of staff resistance. And what we're talking about, people complain about top-down management, but in these type of situations, it's actually really effective. And particularly for those people who are inputting the data, who just feel that their workload has just been doubled. And the implementation timeline, it can be a long time until the benefits are realised because the ironing out of the problems. It can take years. That has to be attacked appropriately. So, yeah, I guess Randy, if you want to.
Yeah, I think the way I'm kind of really looking at it is, both from, I'm seeing at it from two sides of the same coin. I'm applying the restraining and driving forces in terms of how this can be the restraining and driving force for what we as a company need to do, but also importantly, also to recognize what are the restraining and driving forces that make this actually valid, or that make this market worthy. But if we see how many people are around this table today, maybe you might say, really there is no need for this product. No, I think we are only at the beginning of the journey, and I'm kind of acutely aware we don't have all the answers that we need to have. But it's about we are on a journey of learning. We know what the driving and restraining forces are and what the landscape is, but we really then within that have to really work hard to try and get our pitch right, get our marketing strategy right, be able to connect with our core customer groups. So that's all that I kind of want to say. But I think it is a useful, basically, reminder for us to look at, what this work is showing us is that whether you look at the driving or restraining forces, I think there is a need for an independent, what you call non-agnostic voice, if you like, which is not technology, bound by technology or supplier constraints. And I think what I want us to be move into is that space where we are not tied to any particular technology or supplier. So where we can go to the public sector and say, look, how do we kind of make the most of the resources that are so scarce? So I think what might be particularly of interest to you is to look at the critical success factor resource phasing model. Which is something that has, born out of this research, and Andrew will take us through it.
Okay.
You say that we newly identified. It's important to know that 4 of these relate to working with partners, at least 4 of them across the patch, and in an implementation where I was a part of within a housing context with a social housing provider, we very much saw that how important it was to engage with the partners in terms of mapping the customer journey, doing the customer journey mapping, and really bringing them on board in terms of creating a common understanding between and ensuring that our goals were really common in terms of what we were seeking to achieve.